Long before The Outer Worlds was even released, just days after its initial announcement, people started drawing comparisons between the world of The Outer Worlds and the world of Fallout New Vegas, with many theories popping up that there could be in fact a connection, that The Outer Worlds and New Vegas could hypothetically take place in the same universe. Much of this really based around statements made by Mr. House, as far as his hopes for New Vegas, but even further the larger world and human race overall. So now that the game is actually here, of course, this question has resurged. I've actually been getting a lot of this in messages on Discord and even emails about a potential connection here. There have been a couple of articles to come out on this, other videos like one by Maddie that actually is really well done. And in this video, what I want to do is actually look at the potential of this. Look at some of the evidence that this actually could be a thing, as there are some oddities or interesting components of the Outer Worlds that may suggest a connection, but then maybe some of the things that could invalidate this. So hopefully after watching this video, you could get a pretty good idea as to where things stand, if the Outer Worlds and Fallout New Vegas have even a small amount of potential of existing in the same universe. But also for those of you that do watch to the end of the video, there are some other mysteries that deserve their own attention just within the realm of the Outer Worlds. As of right now, this is very theory focused, speculation focused, but also based in fact, based on the actual lore of this game. So either way, starting things off, the cornerstone, the real reason people had this idea in the first place was due to the speech or dialogue you can have with Mr. House in Fallout New Vegas. As you're talking to him, you get some options as to what exactly his plans are for New Vegas overall, where he wants to see things go in the near future, but he also goes on to describe where he wants to see things go in the longer future.
What is the NCR? A society of people desperate to experience comfort, ease, luxury. A society of customers. With all that money pouring in, give me 20 years and I'll reignite the high technology development sectors. 50 years and I'll have people in orbit. 100 years and my colony ships will be heading for the stars to search for planets unpolluted by the wrath and folly of a bygone generation.
So of course, that description of having colony ships go into space and colonize some planets is very similar to what we see actually happening in the Outer Worlds. And then of course, taking into consideration that these two games are made by the same developer, it doesn't seem all that crazy to suggest maybe there are some connections there. Many games have done that in the past, but okay, a quote from a 9-year-old game doesn't carry a ton of weight in this regard. What do we actually have in the Outer Worlds that can give this theory a bit more merit? One such thing is actually a terminal on Edgewater, specifically in this building. This is sent to me a couple times. It was found and really popularized by Mr. Matty Plays in his video, which I will have linked down below if you want to see his perspective on this. But in this terminal, you basically find a back and forth between two people on the spirit of adventure, as the subject of this email reads. So to say, of course, I'd never dispute that Earth is the heart of the whole colonial system, but the real adventure and independent spirit upon which humankind truly thrives is to be found out here among the furthest colonies. I still think you're wrong about the history though. The discovery of the skip drive was not what gave the Earth Directorate power over the corporations. The high costs of the Great War left them to a weakened state, and the skip drive was simply the extra leverage the Directorate needed to return to power. So that seemingly is a very interesting piece of lore around the Outer Worlds. The skip drive is basically the device that allows some of those colony ships to get into the far reaches of space, and thus allowed some of these corporations to actually buy up entire systems. Although going forward, to really explain the rest of this and what the Earth Directorate actually is, there will be some minor spoilers in this video, as you don't actually learn about the Earth Directorate too much before the end part of the game. The Earth Directorate was some kind of international government body that would more or less facilitate cooperation and disputes between corporations, but even further actually sell exploration rights to some of the systems you could find out in the universe. So companies would go to the Earth Directorate when they wanted to purchase some of these solar systems. This terminal seems to indicate that a great war occurring on Earth is what provided the additional power the Earth Directorate needed to actually get that position, in addition to the discovery of the skip drive. The Great War, as many of you know, is the iconic war in the Fallout universe, the day the bombs dropped, the day in that game and franchise when the world changed forever. Seeing it mentioned in the Outer Worlds, assuming it is the same war, would be pretty substantial to this theory. And then finally, the last point, and this one also does contain some endgame spoilers, is around the Earth Minister. This is meant to be the person that's communicating back and forth with Earth in the Outer Worlds, although unfortunately for circumstances, he is on house arrest, so he asks you to send Earth a message. As you go to do this, you find out that messages to Earth to actually take 3 to 9 months just based off some of the travel time, but in fact the last ship destined for Earth actually had some kind of issues with it and never arrived, and frankly was never heard from again. And in fact, it seems like the Halcyon colony where you're currently located is kind of isolated. There haven't been messages to and from Earth in years. Seemingly something happened there to cut off this communication, and that's the state you find the end of the game, with some of your major decisions determining what happens next. So when you connect that all together, the mention of this Great War, then also the seeming lack of communication based on the planet that was described as having this Great War, and if you take all of that together, the idea that the Earth had this big Great War that allowed certain people to gain an immense amount of power by strategically placing themselves, seemingly leading to quite a bit of devastation, and maybe things were okay for a little while, but then as years have gone on, contact with the Earth is now seeing just radio silence. In the post-apocalyptic state we find the Fallout universe, it seems pretty plausible that something could have happened to create this issue. And I know a lot of you guys will probably hear these different data points for this theory and really latch onto it, really want it to be true. But even though it all sounds pretty good in that way, and there are undeniable nods to Fallout in the Outer Worlds, such as right at the start of the game, 1023, aka the day the bombs dropped, if you actually look at some of the other lore and evidence in the Outer Worlds, it becomes pretty clear that there's next to no chance of this being true. I tried to curate kind of the best perspective for the first half of this video, but now let's kind of destroy that. First and foremost, although yes, you are 74 years later in the Outer Worlds compared to when you're talking to New Vegas, in the Outer Worlds you're actually late. It's described during the start of the game how your ship was derailed, kicked out of faster to light travel, and thus you arrived quite a bit later than everyone else. Most of the colonies you see in the Outer Worlds were actually created just 4 years after you have that talk, and in fact during the intro sequence of this game you could actually see that date written down, describing when many people, yourself included, actually got into some of those cryopods. Although a lot of stuff in the Outer Worlds doesn't really have dates too closely associated with it, one thing that does is that skip drive we talked about earlier, the thing that seemingly propelled the Earth Directorate into power. On one of the in-game loading screens it's described how the skip drive was actually invented in the 21st century. And that's when the colonization process started, as it allowed people faster than light travel and actually getting out of their own solar system. New Vegas takes place at the end of the 22nd century, so almost 100 years later, and seemingly at the time of that, nobody is actually leaving the solar system, which seems to be kind of irrefutable proof that these are not connected. But then it all comes back around to that theory on the Great War. Is this just a reference, a nod by Obsidian to their past game, or is this an alternate Great War taking place in this? I think what a lot of people were missing on this one is actually that the Great War is just how they refer to World War I. In the universe of the Outer Worlds, the diversion occurs right around 1901. The real-life President McKinley wasn't assassinated in this world, and thus the large corporations were able to continue to build power. The trust busting never occurred. In the Outer Worlds, it's described how World War I still occurred, but World War II was a little bit more up in the air, not really being explicitly confirmed or denied. So it still is just the Great War referring to World War I. Technically, that's never explicitly confirmed one way or the other. There's a few mentions of the Great War in game, but it never really describes whether it's technically World War I or some kind of other Great War. But based off all of the contextual factors, it to me at least seems like they are talking about that one. So I think all of that alone kind of makes it clear that it's two separate universes. And it's not even like, oh, maybe this is a different reality of the Fallout universe, something different happened here. I guess technically that could still be true, but technology in the Outer Worlds universe is way more advanced than in the Fallout universe. And the whole fact that they were going to other solar systems in the 21st century while Fallout was just still building robots and exploding cars seems to indicate that no, this is a little bit too far apart in that regard. But the one aspect of this that there still isn't an answer to, and that is actually very fascinating, is what happened to Earth. In the Outer Worlds, as the game ends, you find out that, hey, we haven't heard from Earth in a while and there is no answer. It's not like, oh, well, it's because of so-and-so. It's a fairly major revelation that is never resolved. You never actually find out why you haven't heard from Earth, and I think that is particularly interesting. That is something major in this universe to just leave open-ended, which makes me feel like that is not a plotline they're forgetting about. It's definitely not a plotline they're probably going to ignore when it comes to potential sequels, or even a bit sooner, potential DLCs for this game. Obviously, as of right now, the game is quite literally not even 1 week old yet, so we're not quite at that point, but I imagine as we hear more and more about what will come with DLC, assuming we actually do get it, we may in fact get a better understanding of what happened to Earth in this universe. As although maybe it's not the Great War from the Fallout franchise, there still is the potential something very horrible and warish did happen on Earth as you are actually playing the Outer Worlds all the way in Halcyon. But either way, hopefully to some degree, this video will put a lot of the questions I've been getting to rest. Although yeah, it would be really cool if these were two one universe, if this actually was House's future. It seems like it is almost certainly not, and just is the Outer Worlds universe. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one, hopefully you found it informative. I still have quite a bit of content for the Outer Worlds on the way, but actually some Fallout stuff, even involving some of those older Fallouts, including some additional videos on New Vegas coming in the next week or so. As always, again, I thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.